let's shift gears and talk about one of my very favorite problems in retail and in e-commerce, which is the reverse logistics,
Mm,
returns. And
yes.
returns, so if we look at returns for last year, if you believe the National Retail Federation, which I think this is probably a pretty decent estimate, they say that there were somewhere around $750 billion in returns. So this is larger than most countries' GDP. And we're just sending this back through the mail for the most part. This is a big problem in retail. And it's a big problem because it's inefficient for the retailer in terms of revenue. It is terrible for the environment because we're moving these goods around the world. And a lot of these goods actually end up in some sort of disposition or landfill. I mean, on multiple levels, returns
Mhm.
are terrible. So I'm curious when you're thinking about returns, because we know the magnitude, how should retailers be thinking about starting to crack down on this problem without, by the way, turning off customers?
Sure. Well, I'll start with probably not the most obvious area because when retailers try to tackle the problems of returns and the cost of reverse logistics and the lost opportunity of not being able to restock a particular item, that's what they focus on, right? They focus on, okay, well, now I have a problem. How do I make the best of it? It really starts with merchandising. So I worked with a retailer a while back where we were identifying with the reverse logistics team, who is obviously seeing and has a rich amount of data of what's getting returned at what rate, what kind of damage rate, or what have you. And we designed a process where the reverse logistics team met regularly with the merchandising teams to help inform the merchants, hey, these items in your category have a massively high return rate. Let's talk about why they're being constantly returned. Maybe it's the vendor not boxing it appropriately, whatever it is, right? But it really starts there. Companies should think about, how do I change my product assortment, or at least be mindful about my product assortment, where the returns aspect is another attribute that I consider on top of everything else that a merchant would be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a massively important thing. I know when I go on Amazon and I'm shopping and I click on something and it says this is a high return rate item. I think that's not an item that I'm going to buy. Right. So that's at least signaling to me as a
Yeah.
customer. And I know that some retailers also, when they are doing the algorithm that does the sort for merchandising, high return items are going to get sent down to the bottom. So the merchandising on the front makes a ton of sense. And I think it's probably counterintuitive to how many retailers think about solving that problem. But I like
Right.
that. On the other end, which is you're always going to get some goods back.
Yep.
How should retailers be thinking
Yep.
about solving these problems, particularly going into a high return season?
Sure. Sure. So imagine a decision tree. That's kind of how I think. Right? So you have a return, you get something returned. So there are a number of things that you want to be able to do in a certain order of priority. Priority number one is you want to be able to accept that return, inspect it very quickly, and restock it. Right? That's obviously the best case scenario for any retailer. Then, once you determine that you cannot restock it for any given reason, right? Whether it was worn too much, it's damaged, what have you, then you should think about a whole series of options. And you have to build this into an operating model, as we did with a retailer a while back, Brian. That operating model needs to consider a series of prioritized options for how do I dispose of that item, with the last resort being a landfill, right? So working with organizations where you donate to charities and so forth, working with NGOs. A lot of retailers don't think about this. Working with NGOs, where yes, there's a cost of shipping it, but at least it's being shipped to a country where that those, let's say that apparel, those garments are going to be put to use. So there's a whole series of things that you should think about in terms of what channels can I dispose this product? And of course, it's going to vary by retailer. If you're a luxury retailer, you're going to obviously have very different thresholds for where you want your stuff ending up at the end of the day. But as you look at all those channels, then there's a whole economics case behind each of those channels in terms of, okay, well, what is the financial impact of me putting those products through a particular channel? What is the potential benefit? Because there could be also a revenue benefit, right? I may not get 100% of that value back, but can I get 30 cents on it, right? So what is the benefit? Oh, and by the way, there should be a third element. What is the sustainability score of what I just did, right? All those should be weighted into your economics as you think about that decision tree, right, of how you flow through those various channels.
Well, it sounds like if you're thinking about it the right way and going through this decision tree, there's also a brand halo to be had.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're making a donation to an NGO instead of sending something to a landfill, that feels like a win. I mean, I think about all these restaurants that talk about how they donate food at the end of the day. Pret talks about how they donate food to, their local food kitchen. Makes a lot of sense.